Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 10th and final episode of this, or rather, the second season of This, That, and the Other. My name is Varun Chandramohan, your host for today. Now, This, That, and the Other has been a fantastic series that's been tackling some of the biggest and most debated topics that both managers and employees encounter in their professional and personal lives. Now, so far in the series, during the second season, we've covered topics such as the pursuit of happiness, and if it was a fool's dream or a possibility. We spoke about longevity and whether it was down to genetics or choice, bias in the workplace when personal life choices collide with your professional life. We spoke about office politics and the art of sucking up. And then we looked at disruptive HR practices and if they were easier said than done. We spoke about expat and trailing spouses, the trials and tribulations of working abroad, good parenting while climbing the corporate ladder. We looked at whether both can be done equally, patience, attitude, and grit. We looked at whether they can be learned. And just last week, we spoke about MBAs and DBAs in the corporate world, and we looked at whether they were really a requirement or an adornment. Now, our final episode of the season is a personal favorite of mine, and we will be separating fact from fiction on a topic that's so important and so in your face, to be honest, yet nobody talks about it: the science and pseudoscience in corporate training. Now, just a reminder to everyone, all our past episodes on of this, that, and the other, and our webinar series are available on Luminary Learning Solutions YouTube page. So do swing by our page on YouTube and don't forget to like our videos and hit that subscribe button. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to introduce my guest. First up, she's no stranger to the show. She's a clinical psychologist, an award-winning speaker, innovator. She's a peak performance and neuroscience flow researcher. She was also a guest on episode 5 of This, That, and the Other. Hellenic Ajaru is here with us today. Hello, Hellenic. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Varun, and to Anton and to my wonderful new friend. I'm very glad to be here today. Thank you so much.
All right, brilliant, and hello again. All right, next up, our final guest. She's a human behavior expert and a transformational trainer who helps organizations achieve significantly increased performance. She currently serves as a managing director of Michelle Mills Porter Limited and known widely as the people reader. Michelle Mills Porter is here with us today. Hello, Michelle. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I feel like I'm in esteemed company.
Indeed, you are. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Elenique, as well. Okay, so let's get started. Now, this topic is a little close to my heart, and it needs to be discussed. In this day of fact checking, there's a lot of hocus pocus stuff going out there, and they've been packaged, they've been sold, and unfortunately, people have been gullible, especially corporations, and they pay big money for some of these trainings. So my question to the panel, and I'd like to start with you, Michelle, and then we can go around the table. How much of pseudoscience is there in corporate training out there? What have you seen so far?
Well, my personal opinion is that it's absolutely flooded, but I work in an area which is still considered woo-woo by a lot of people in industry. So working in behaviour profiling, that's an area where a lot of people don't understand whether there is any science or or any, whether it's pseudoscience or whether it's neuroscience, and there's a lot of confusion over it. Now, I'm actually currently writing the neuroscience into my behaviour analyses. For me to do that, but I've seen some absolutely appalling examples of people using neuroscience as a title but absolutely misrepresenting it, and it gives the entire industry a really bad name.
Right. And what about you, Hellenic? Any thoughts on, or rather, what have you seen out of the training that's out there? How much of pseudoscience have you seen?
Yes, so excited about this topic. I think for a long time now, I've been having a lot of frustration about what is happening, not just to the industry of coaching and corporate training and business sector, but really the way a lot of very deep, I would like to say scientific work is being mass produced or taken into mass culture,
Right.
and presented for the fact that it has some kind of credibility, but then obviously distorted so much that so that it no longer does. And I think we're doing that in many sectors of the world, not just in business, but it's concerning in business because really it does then manage to filter out a kind of level of information or a level of theory or practice or whatever ends up happening with it that is distorted and that is superficial. And this is the biggest problem with what I see in the industry right now is people are getting the idea that the level of training that they're doing has a kind of depth, and then they have a kind of depth from doing it that doesn't actually exist in the way that they're receiving the information and the way they're then applying it. So it's kind of using credibility for the fact that you think something is credible, but not actually going deep enough with it, or not being accurate enough with it, not being scientific enough with it, not having people that are really seasoned experts presented to you at the level of depth that is needed, so that you can learn it and apply it yourself and become deeper in what it is that you're doing as well. So we have this happening in many sectors of the world. We have it, just in fast food. We have it in, mass entertainment. We have lots of ways that our society is, I would say, watering down very original content that actually has had a certain level of credibility and depth. So just to say, where do I see it? I think I see it in testing methods. There's a lot of people popping up with quizzes, surveys, all kinds of ways of trying to disseminate information or get people intrigued, get them engaged, social media, whatever, in a method that's pretty basic, that doesn't really have the scientific data behind it. And then there is also a lot of trainers doing all kinds of training with very specific short training themselves, not really the kind of deep level dive that some people are doing to present that same content. Lots of ways more to mention, but I think for now I give the picture that it's making us a little bit distorted.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point, and I'm so glad that you touched on some examples, because I was going to ask Michelle, Michelle, like if you were to pick a couple of examples, like things that stood out that you could not believe were practiced, but which were false. Do you have any examples like that you could share with us?
Well, I think especially working in the speaking industry, we're picked up on this all the time, because when you're in an association, I'm in the Professional Speaking Association, which is also part of the Global Speaking Association. And it's great being in an association like that, because when you say something, people will question and people will check. So we're always keeping a check on each other. And I think it's human nature for us to not necessarily dumb down, but actually just to remember the snippets that are important to us. And what happens with that is when you have the real science and people remember it in a form of Chinese whispers, then what we get is exactly what Hellenique was describing. We get, either a dumbed down version or a version that is just not accurate. So one of the examples that springs to mind, which is something that's been a massive topic, certainly in the UK, has been the left brain, right brain thinking. And people misconstrue where it comes from and what it means, and just dumb it down and say either you're a left brain thinker or a right brain thinker, and they neglect the fact that we constantly use the entire of our brain all the time. So you can't put it down into whether you're a left brain thinker or a right brain thinker. It's so much more involved than that and more detailed than that. But that's the danger when you pick up little snippets and then repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, and so it actually becomes nonsense.
That's such a good point. I mean, I was looking at some statistics, and thank you so much for bringing that up. And when I was doing my research, I just found out. I mean, this has always been curious. Like whenever I'm sitting in a training program, and whether it's for Luminary or elsewhere, we look at stuff and we start questioning. Okay, that doesn't seem right, and then we go and try to explore further. Recently, I found out that this phrase saying that we only use 10% of our brain, apparently it's been debunked. Where it came from, how it became, this popular. Obviously, I'd have to read more on that, but they're saying no, we are using much more than 10% of our brain. And then there was another thing that they pointed out, saying 90% of your communication is nonverbal, and scientists are always asking, how would you know it's 90%? And if that's the case, why are telephone and email conversations more popular? And obviously there's a lot of debate, and it goes back to Helene's point, like how you arrive at certain statistics, the tests themselves. There's a lot of argument there, or there's a lot of gray area there, so I really appreciate you bringing that up. And I think I need to dive into a topic which is very, very widespread in Sri Lanka, and shrouded, and it's like it's almost like, I hope you guys have heard of Marmite, Vegemite, the yeast spread. There's a famous saying either you love it or hate it. There's nobody in the middle. And similarly, NLP falls into the same category. You've got people who swear by it. They say it works. It's backed by science and all of that. And then you, on the other side, you say it's nothing but a bunch of random things put together. And I'd love to ask your thoughts on that. So this is open to the panel. What do you think about NLP? Any thoughts on NLP? So Michelle, Hellenic, you guys are free to jump in.
Well, forgive me for butting in, but yeah, I think that's a real area. If you think about how NLP was created, it was created by people that came from a neuroscience background. So it definitely has some weight attached to it. The problem, I believe, with NLP is the way that people are trained and the way that people get their qualifications in NLP. And it can result in a host of snake oil salesmen that actually kind of misquote a lot of those things. Now, personally, I have fibromyalgia as one of the conditions that I have to put up with. And recently, I was contacted by somebody who was purporting to be an NLP expert, and he says I can fix that without knowing anything about my condition, without knowing anything about what caused it or whatever. Just jumps to a conclusion, offers a snake oil solution, and with that tarnishes the rest of the industry. So I think I definitely think there is some truth and some really good stuff within NLP, but there are a lot of NLP practitioners that I simply wouldn't give the time of day.
Right. And Hellenic, in your experience, what has your experience been with NLP, and any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just by the way, everybody listening, and to all of us here, and Michelle, thank you so much. So many amazing points. I'm enjoying this so much because I'm getting a chance to really vent and let go a lot of frustration that's been building for many years. And I want to say, as a psychologist, it's been very concerning actually to watch people take very deep psychological content, theory, practice, a kind of level of complexity that exists in the brain, body, mind system, and turn it into, fly by night. And I really do mean that, sometimes a weekend worth of training that then qualifies somebody to go and work on the body, mind system. And I say this to many of my clients. I say it to many people in the spiritual sector, because I used to work cross spectrum. I used to do a lot of spiritual teaching. And what does that mean? It means I would talk more about the invisible, not just, visible conditions, and how things work together. And really do notice a large number of people distorting content. And it's very easy to do. So I want to, just also have some compassionate empathy for the fact that, yes, some people like to jump into a quick training and get a bit of power to work on people. So it's easy to then take something, flash it around like an NLP qualification, and then say you can make miracles, you can move, you can walk on water, you know, you can solve fibromyalgia, without going into the complexity. And here's the point, of the core complex of the mind. And this is what a lot of people that are working, let's say, on these different levels, that haven't done deep teaching and don't have the kind of 7-year-long study or the neuroscientific grueling research background, you know, that's needed to be able to qualify behavioral change and to be able to produce behavioral change at the level that's really expected, you know. And there are so many reasons why we have to look at the individual, the history, the complexity of what we call the core complex of the mind, because we know, if anything, from neuroscience, that behavioral change, changing any habit in the future, requires a complex reworking of many things from the past, many wounds, traumas, personality structure, repetition of certain thought patterns, changing the way they connect to emotion, and then only changing behavior. So if we just really minimize that or simplify that, we are culprits of proposing and putting out into the world double signals, mixed messaging, absolute errors in information, and actually deceiving people to make them believe that we can do certain things that actually no one can do and no one should be doing, because it's up to the person actually doing the training, doing the behavioral therapy change, or doing the actual NLP session, or working with the expert to assist them to do that change themselves, first of all. And when you really work deep enough, you understand that it's not you who makes somebody all of a sudden fixed or transforms them, or you don't get high on the power of knowing a technique. But a lot of practitioners tend to get literally blindsided by this power to work on the body-mind system, don't understand the depth, the core complexity of the mind in order to do it with respect and integrity, and then start to actually promote something out there in the world that absolutely does, again, diminish the value of a very powerful technique when you know how to work with it at the deepest level, because then you know that very specific times it's not going to work. Other times it's up to the client, it's up to the patient's readiness, whether it will work or not. Other times it has to do with the relationship in the treatment method. And a lot of these things are, I'm just calming myself down here because I get really passionate about this. A lot of these things are minimized or totally swiped off the table because now the person wants to, jump into their ego of being someone who can fix a problem. And when you're working with people or training people, this is the one thing you really have to watch, is your ego. It's not about, you. It's really not about the technique. It's about the transmission of assisting someone and the other person being receptive to the assistance, the technique itself, the theory itself, the research itself. Sometimes is not the point. The point is, what is the end goal and how are you going to get there using whatever information accurately with the kind of complexity it deserves in order to deliver or to begin to deliver a result.
Right.
So I think we've got a lot of ego mixing into a lot of this stuff. And that's one thing we do need to be working on as practitioners, trainers, leaders, whatever we are, is we have to keep our egos in check. It's not about us and what we know and what we've studied. Sure. It's a lot more complex than that. And that's why you have to study enough and be accurate enough so that you're not sending out all kinds of, what did you call it before our call, Michelle, bogus theories or
no, I think I called it neurobollocks.
Neurobollocks, exactly. Just kind of riding on certain things to look credible, but not really having the depth to deliver results.
Can I just interject here?
Yeah.
I can say that you know, Hellenique is extremely well versed in what she does, and you know, I don't want people to think that, you know, that I think I'm a neuroscientist, and I think this is really important. I'm one of those people that tends to bridge the gap. So I'm talking to a lot of people that don't understand that information, but where I go to for my fact is the doctors of neuroscience. So, you know, Dr. Linda Shaw, who I did a neuroscience course with her recently. She's one of the experts I go to. Dr. Leori Fern-Pollock, she is one of the experts that I go to for my information when I want to be checked. Even friends like Heather Wright, you know, a fantastic speaker that talks about, you know, being able to change behaviour on a long level. These are the people that I will go to check. I don't just spout stuff and expect people to, you know, to listen to what I say. If I'm going to say something, I need to make sure that it is double checked, that I've got, you know, some real weight behind what I do, because I haven't spent years and years and years studying, which is what it takes to be in a position to be able to do that with any authority.
Yeah. And can I qualify that I'm not a neuroscientist either, and would never call myself that unless I go and do, you know, the new PhD level training in that complexity of how the body-mind system works on very specific neuroscientific research, which, by the way, is being updated day by day right now. And I have to watch myself from slipping into pseudoscience as a psychologist. And I think the distinction is the difference that we all have to start to realize is that there is a level of awareness that one needs to have to watch oneself. Like you're saying, Michelle, you go and do your fact checking, you know, myself too. I used to teach a lot about how rhythm affects the brain, and I would slip very easily into trying to make it simple enough for people to understand about right-left hemispheres. And I was very happy to be in circles where people would check that with me, who were actually, you know, psychologists as well. They were looking as well at the complexity. There happens to be a lot more research right now on really how the brain is interconnecting. But the clarification from many people that, hey, don't simplify it too much, really helped me to also make sure that I'm not simplifying things so much so that people get it. But I think this is what a lot of people might be doing innocently as well, is that they try to take a research study or they try to take a piece of information and then they try and make it palpable, digestible to an audience. And so what we've seen happening, even in public speaking, even in writing a blog, even in, you know, doing a social media post, that we've got a level of information sharing right now that is encouraging people to put information out really quickly. And I think work also in the industry in very quick ways as well, trying to, like, you know, get the next client or trying to, you know, show up that you can do the same thing as the guy that pitched yesterday or whatever it is. And in this way, we're getting encouraged to kind of simplify things. And we have to be able to have enough awareness to check ourselves about whether we then are being accurate enough. And we have to be in circles, in masterminds, in groups, in mentoring relationships, coming into, you know, kind of associations like what you were saying before, Michelle, being in company with people that are going to help hold us accountable to what we do and say. And that is the difference between someone who's really expert in something and someone who's just sharing information about it. And I think we need to know, be brave enough to also own up to where we really are on that spectrum. So in defense to people, I think it's tempting, it's possible, it's very easy to put out information and not give it with the kind of depth and accuracy it needs. But also doing that means we have to have our own accountability to check, where am I really credible? How can I be accountable to that? And, you know, from the whole example of left brain, I just want to add in the final note there that the whole point of that whole discussion in training is to talk about all the stuff we talk about the brain, is to really put a message across. And the basic message is that we do need to look at more integrative ways of using our brain. And we have way more capacity than what we do use. So let's leave it to the experts to tell us exactly how and exactly how much. But let's take the basic message and, you know, use that to advance our knowledge, but not try to explain why and then simplify things, because that's where we get into trouble. I think I see you all freezing.
I'm still here.
Okay.
Faroon is frozen for me as well. I'm
Okay.
just backing up exactly what you said, Helenique.
Yeah.
It's real frustration when people say things that just aren't true. And it, you know, but I do think it's human nature to a certain extent,
Yeah.
don't you?
Yeah, I think so too. Varun, are you back with us? Yes.
Yeah, just
Yes, I think I'm here.
Okay, good. So we were saying how
Yeah.
it's human nature. Like a lot of this is just, you know, something that we all naturally tend to do, is try to remember certain things. So we simplify it down. We don't remember all the details. So perhaps that's also just why it happens so much.
Sure. And so I have an interesting observation that I'd like to bring up. And first of all, thank you for talking about this, because it is false equivalence, isn't it? Like just because something sounds right, it doesn't necessarily mean they're right. So I have an interesting question, because recently, and this is a little outside of corporate training, and when we I was referred to a chiropractor recently, and we were like, okay, fine, chiropractor, you know, just to become, you know, go check this person out and so on. And so, by the way, can you guys hear me okay? I think I
Yes.
lost the video feed. Okay, perfect. All right. Um, so during this moment, I mean, a few sessions went fine, not a problem. People called him a doctor. He's got a certificate. And then after one session, I saw flashes in my eye, and then I was like, okay, that's not right. And then I kind of like started researching, and then I found out chiropractors don't go to medical school, and they are called doctors. And so apparently the good chiropractors, they take what's deep rooted with science, and then they take other elements like such as physiotherapy, and then they integrate them together, and those are the best kind. Now, my question to you is that as a you know, regular person out there, you see you see doctor whoever, chiropractor, with all the qualifications, and then you go in, but I can see how easily gullible it can be, or rather, or, or how it could be misleading sometimes, or right, how you could take up someone on something where you don't fully understand what's going on. So my question is, how would you, like if you were an HR manager, or if you were simply a participant who's planning to go through a training program, or even visiting an expert, or you know, what should we do? I mean, should we research a particular area in detail before going? Is there any advice in that sense?
For my contribution here, I'd like to say referral, I think, is a very good way to check out the value that somebody can bring to a situation. What results they deliver for someone else could be a very good way to endorse what they do. And I want to also give credit where credit is due, because sometimes people don't have a certain level of training, but they can produce amazing results. And it's only important then to know where you stand as an HR director, or as anyone that's hiring a service, whether it's a chiropractor, a doctor, or a healer, or a behavioral analyst, or whatever it is, just to know something about the history of that person. Maybe you have a referral, maybe you don't. So what's important is to know, I'm going to a trained expert, I'm going to someone that's trained a little bit less, I'm going to someone that's potentially a maverick, potentially takes great risks, potentially is a magician, I don't know what, but hey, I'm giving it a shot. Because then you go with a prepared mind that you're going for someone that has a scientific background, and that's what you're looking for, or you're going to try a wild card, or you're going to have a service and you not know how it will turn out. There's nothing wrong with that. The point is just to know where you stand and to also decide for yourself whether you are prepared to take a smaller risk or a larger risk. And that's not saying that if you go with a seasoned professional that you're going to get the results, just because they've got the training and the qualification and you've checked out their history and their bio and you like it, doesn't mean either that it's a guaranteed result. But at least you have some awareness of where you stand in your decision making. I think that's really important. Michelle, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I think this, I really chime with what you're saying from a completely different angle, actually. If you look at people who are experts in neuroscience, let's take that example. Somebody can say something that is expert and absolutely true, and then, you know, neuroscience moves on extremely quickly, and within a couple of months that idea has been taken over by a new thought or a new discovery. My issue here is the fact that we are naturally very trusting. You know, as human beings, we are quite often very trusting. So when someone says they're a doctor, it's a label that we think, great, they know what they're talking about. But in this, you know, in the same situation, you go to somebody that is a specialist in a certain subject, and what we need to remember is that we're always learning, we're always evolving, and it's very difficult. If I want to go out there and get some information and I want to understand the absolute truth, I'm not going to find it, because nothing is absolutely true. We have opinions, and, you know, we have expert opinions from all over the shop, but it's our responsibility to find what works for us. So as with you, with your chiropractor, you need to find somebody, like Helenique said, that gives you the results you need. And, you know, that doesn't necessarily correlate to the qualifications they have. And it's the same in training, in corporate training. You need to find somebody that gives you the results that you want and that you need and works for you. And it doesn't necessarily correlate to what qualifications they have and all that kind of stuff. So a certain amount of it is trial and error, and there's no getting away from that. There is no clear right and wrong.
Yeah, I want to echo that. Trial periods are really good ways to check people out, and then referrals, as we said, but then also having your own power of decision making and knowing that it's, you know, it's your choice to find somebody. So you also have to enter into a certain amount of risk and accept that, you know, because sometimes we also hold people so accountable to certain things, paradoxically to what we were saying at the beginning of this session. And, you know, we should in certain cases, but this also comes down to integrity of the individual practicing, the trainer, the teacher, the leader, whoever it is that we're consulting, and the client or the patient or the participant. You know, we each have a level of integrity that we need to be managing in life, and it does come down to that. When you propose yourself to be skilled in something, you do have to look around and see who are the people that are more skilled than me and where do I stand in that spectrum, and I need to disclose that clearly. I teach this very seriously to female leaders because, especially in the industry of coaching, and maybe we can touch on that for a moment. I'd love to know Michelle's opinion on this. There is, you know, such an incredible amount of information about how coaching helps companies transform. You know, there's a huge coaching industry that works really well. But when you really get into it, you can see there are, you know, A-level coaches, B-level coaches, C-level coaches. I don't know what else to call that. There are degrees of coaching and degrees of expertise in coaching as well. So who do you trust in terms of a coach who has a certain amount of maybe even pseudoscience in the way that they coach, and others who have, you know, behavioral modification training and people who have deep knowledge in science, in psychology, in behavioral change. You know, it's up to you, again, small, medium or large risk. But certainly coaching is another one of those industries that's become very distorted and is also, you know, we say in Greek, you need to put a little bit of water in your wine when you don't like something. And I have to put a lot of water in my wine. I was joking with a friend of mine saying I have to drink so much wine because I have to put so much water. But actually, there's a lot of that happening in the world, and we should be a little bit concerned. We should be having certain kinds of standards in place, and we try to, but still, there's still a lot of slipping through the cracks. But coaching, I think, is another one of those places where we get a lot of pseudo coaching that's not going deep enough, quite frankly, not at all.
Right, absolutely. I let me ask my panel something a little interesting. Have you guys heard of this story, the rebirth of the eagle? It was quite popular like a long time ago. It's still being used quite a lot, and to talk about change management and stuff. And to the audience member who may not know what this is, it's basically this story that's going around, or rather presentation that talks about how an eagle at the age of 35, the feathers become heavy, and then they need to kind of pluck out the feathers for new feathers to grow. They need to break their beak for a new beak to grow, and then how once it goes through this change management and which it had to go through, that it'll live for another 35 years after that. Now, this was introduced to me when I was in school, and then in college, and then in then in my later studies, and but something wasn't right, and I was just thinking, wait, it doesn't sound right, and then I started to kind of dig a little deeper, and then I found out, I think it was the University of Minnesota, their Raptor Center, basically just said if an eagle did that, it'll die within a week, and that the lifespan of an eagle is approximately 30 years, and that's at best if they were in captivity and being fed regularly. Now here's my question, and here's where I had a big issue. I got into a huge argument once with one of our country's leading Kaizen and change management expert. Like, he's been recognized by foreign governments. He's been recognized by the Japanese government for being an expert and for contributing, in the field of Kaizen in our country. And he absolutely did not, he stood his ground. He said, no, that is true. This is being taught in change management school. This is it, and you're wrong because who's the expert here? And I was a little dumbfounded. But then I have two questions here. So again, if you encounter an expert and they do say this, no, this is it, I know better than you, how would you handle that? And then from a trainer perspective, how do you not fall prey to this? Or I think a beautiful effect that I came across was a Dunning-Kruger effect, and the name is all over the place now with the recent U.S. election and so on, and how sometimes I think in layman's term it's where it says you're incompetent to understand that you're incompetent, or rather the less you know, the more you're likely to perceive yourself as an expert. So in this climate, so as a participant, as somebody who's dealing with someone like this, what can you do? Is there anything you can do? And the second question is, if you are the trainer, how do you prevent or sort of catch yourself from falling into one of these things, or being or rather falling prey for one of these things, which could happen to anyone? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think from my aspect, that very much comes down to behaviour, and I think there are certain behaviour types that really like to understand, and this comes down to core values as well as behaviours. There are certain people who find it extremely important to have all the theoretical evidence, to make sure that they have the qualification, to make sure that everything they say people, and to a certain extent this is the camp that I sit in, who are, that do things intuitively, that draw from their life experience, and hasn't got the patience you know, or the ability to be able to sit down and, you know, and do the academia, you know, I just want to rush through to the end. So there are very different kinds of people. Now, for somebody who, you know, who becomes an expert, you're putting your life's work into what you do. So of course, defensive naturally, if you started and suggested that there was something wrong with that, you know, which, you know, obviously there isn't. But if you did, you know, I'd be extremely defensive. But I think what Helen said earlier on is said earlier on is so incredibly important about understanding where you are in the scheme of things and having that open mind to be able to change and to evolve. So if somebody comes to me and says, I don't think that's right, I've got this idea, being open to that and being open to grow is incredibly important. What do you think, Helenique?
Yeah, this is again so central, coming down to keeping our egos in check and being able to have a level of self-awareness that allows you to check your credibility as well. And I think it's very hard the more expert you get. It's, you know, something that they do in higher levels of academia, where you have to defend your research study, for example, in a PhD, which a friend of mine recently had to defend. You have to go into a kind of grueling debate, argument with highly expert people who have great levels of information about your topic. And then you have to kind of be robust enough to test that out. And this is what a lot of people that are really at expert level have to learn to be able to do. And that's why I said before, being in these circles where you can get tested, you know, is so important, because it does give you this awareness of ethics. And this is where I think a lot of training nowadays falls short. You know, that they don't do a lot of training in ethics. When you go and do an NLP course, you're not really training that much in ethics. So the ethical standard is really important. But of course, we can see now that defensive personalities are something we all, rather everybody has a level of defensiveness against something they're precious about or attached to, or they know a lot about. It's very natural. I totally agree with Michelle. It's a great point for us all to remember. You know, when we get defensive, we should know that something in us is needing to check out a little bit more, maybe because we feel like we have to defend it. So certainly it's useful to also have a kind of self-awareness, like I said, about it. But we have to respect also that sometimes people have ways of understanding information that is different to the way that we understand it. And the eye can never see itself. We used to say that in ways of talking about why it's so important to work with a professional on yourself and on your life, on your mission, your goals, because you need somebody outside of you to look at things that you are not willing enough or not able enough or not agile enough in your personality to solve or to fix. And on that point, my final thing here is neuroagility is something very, very important for us that we do learn from neuroscience, that we have to start learning to become and develop. So all of us have to learn to be more flexible, more accommodating, more understanding, more compassionate, to be able to change our thinking systems. And when you're an expert in your field, that's something you really do learn to do. And quite frankly, you should go back and check and say, well, okay, maybe there is, you know, opposing information. And on that point, there is often a difference of opinion on many things. And that's also okay. It creates healthy debate and healthy knowledge sharing. So we should make space for it too.
Sure. Can I ask you, could there be an instance where there is a placebo effect, like let's say for some reason you've gone ahead with a trainer, the particular training program is riddled with pseudoscience, but for some reason, due to either a placebo effect or due to other reasons, results are obtained. And have you, in your experience, seen something like that happen and then kind of fall apart when things get very real? Or is that a real danger that organizations and HR teams should be aware of? Um, uh, just going out on a limb here, and very curious to know if that is something that could happen or has happened in your experience.
There are so many good salespeople out there, aren't there? And like Helenique said earlier on about whether they're a magician or a salesperson or whatever. It's so easy to be wooed and to be swayed by somebody who is really good at selling what they do. But do you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb and say something there.
Oh, yeah.
If it works, whether it's whether it's a placebo or not, if it has the effect, then what is it that we're challenging? If it has the desired effect, if you get the results, then actually does it really matter? That's a question that people have to ask themselves. Again, like I said before, some people will be infuriated by that and say, yes, of course it matters. It has to be exactly right. That is a behavior trait in them. There are other people that say, do you know what? It doesn't matter. If it gets the end result, then I don't really care. If my people are empowered by this, if my people are energized by this and it's working for them, then I don't want to double check somebody's qualifications. So it really is down to choice, and thank the Lord that we are so diverse, as a race.
Yeah.
Right.
Varun,
any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're asking some great questions, and I like how we're going into these little nooks and crannies,
Yeah.
I think the British say. There's a really great book out there called Are the Placebo by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and this is coming back full on point to neuroscience. You want to know neuroscience and someone who's really expert enough to talk about behavioral change, you could look at that book and you could see that there's a very deep way of explaining why we change, how we change, and our belief in what we're doing is really the most important thing. That's what the book's saying. You Are Superhuman is another book that he's written. This is a psychologist who went to study neuroscience and actually works very deeply on the body-mind system, actually teaches a kind of yoga, but doesn't really call it yoga because it has all the neuroscientific research that he's done with all the people he's tested, the MRIs, So we learn from that and many things that, it's okay to have something shift because we believe deeply in it. It's actually the power of our mind to do that. That's what we were saying before about it not necessarily being about the trainer or the person sometimes, but rather what they mirror in you and your power, which you then choose to activate or take up or begin to exercise. But more to the literal sense of your question, there is a big power in believing in something and letting it change, yes. But I think sometimes too, we could be saying that there is a way where we get deceived sometimes by things that don't really have their weight in gold. And it's the whole field of inspirational speaking, I think, was demonstrating that there is a place for that in human nature and that there is a need and an impact. You can hear someone just inspire you, speaking about something that inspires you, and then you go out there believing that you can transform your life, so there's a place where it works really well, that kind of placebo idea, and then there's a place where we can actually just ride on a high of thinking I've got this, but actually I do need deeper work, and so it doesn't work, or I need to work with someone who knows a bit more of a deeper level about this. But then also, paradoxically speaking, we all do have this power to transform and change. So the more we can get people in front of us that show us ways to do that, and they can really be accurate about what they need to tell us to do it, the better.
Right.
It's all good and all good at the end of the day.
Yeah, agreed. So let me ask you a personal question, and this I think will be applicable to any trainer out there, even professionals who are listening to this, and especially those who are heading HR teams and so on. So personally, as individuals, as trainers, consultants, and coaches, what is your personal method to ensure that your content or training is on point backed by science. How do you do that, or do you have what's that process like? And the reason I ask this is because sometimes not maybe it may be obvious to a lot of people, but sometimes there may be trainers and professionals out there who may not know how to go about kind of kind of bulletproofing their training programs, initiatives, and so on. So and then and also to have what's a realistic expectation and what should be acceptable, not acceptable. So if you could explain your process, like personally, when you create a program or content, what's your approach? And maybe if you can also hear from Michelle as well. So Hellenic, would you like to go first, then Michelle afterwards? Yeah.
I think I want to be really real here, that a lot of my work is experimentational and innovative and does go into the field of what we could call pseudoscience.
Okay.
And I'm owning up to it when I'm doing that. And I think that's been a very interesting playground for me. So what I mean is that I enjoy the exploration of the invisible, the stuff that hasn't been tested yet, the stuff that does need to be thought out of in a new way, that kind of jumping out the box, thinking about it in a new way. Because there are, second point, lots of flaws in scientific study and scientific research, and there's a level of complexity in scientific research that relates to what we call correlations, rather than,
right.
Something causes something. We see something has a relationship to something. So the detail of every single research study is so complex in order to produce whatever interpretation or result it produces, that you have to understand the entire context, all the variables involved, in order to make a kind of interpretation. So it's not fair to say that if it happened in America, it's going to happen in Europe, for example. You can't say that. There might be a correlation between certain things, but it doesn't mean you can translate that study somewhere else. So because of that, I've become kind of creative and innovative, let's say, to look at new ways, new methods of doing things. But having said that, I do that knowing something about the research basis and foundation for something, and then looking at how do you experiment from that. At the same time, there are places, speeches, programs that I developed that are entirely based on scientific study. For example, I work with the Enneagram, and it was very important for me to find a testing system that had been done cross-culturally. And the Enneagram is actually a whole complex way of understanding neurosis in clinical work. So it's understanding how the ego forms and what happens with the neurotic energy in each nervous system that creates this thing that we call a character or a personality. And then business circles have taken that and interpreted it into how do you build your team, who's a good leader, who should be in your back office, etc. So finding a testing system for it, there are many online, and there are many surveys and easy quizzes, and people love to go and find out what Enneatype are they. But for me, it was really important to go and find the Integrative Enneagram Solution Institute that has done research cross-culturally on many diverse groups. This is an example then of basing my training and doing my, let's say, coaching, although I do mentoring, coaching and training of the startups and leaders and speakers who want to go deeper to understand not just what type they are, but how do they solve some of the problems that they really have in life because of that. And so we look at the deeper layer of personality, but we do the test with an institute that has very deep reputation. If I'm developing a new course or something that's more touchy-feely, which I see we need a lot of right now, we need more EQ, empathic kind of courses, ways of getting more in touch with who we really are, humanizing the workforce. I mean, I go into a lot of process, which is honestly and disclosingly not based in something scientific yet. And that's the innovative part. So for me, both are really important. Know where you're going to base something on extensive research and history and call it that and find the best of the best, and then experiment, create, develop, but then also call it that. Don't try and pretend that it's that when it's not.
Right.
The thing, the exploration part of our nature. And there's nothing wrong with it, but own up to it, be accountable to it, and say, guys, this is not based in any kind of evidence that I can show, but do you want to experiment? You know, are 10 leaders going to jump in a group and experiment on the new styles of leadership, rubbing away the history and the past, not looking for scientific evidence or any research whatsoever? Are we going to explore and do process? Or let's go on this theory and decide if we can apply it, and let's learn it, and let's learn it from the best experts, depending which method you're going to be using. So that's me. How about you, Michelle?
Well, you just stole my thunder again, haven't you, really, Helenique? I have to say, I think for me, there are two different things here. And you know, I have to say, we're talking about Enneagram and stuff like that. It's another kind of behaviour profile, to a certain extent. I've just had mine done. I've just paid to have mine done, and do you know what? It wasn't right. It was flawed. So I'm not saying that they all are, but what I'm saying is this is exactly the point we've been talking about. Yeah. You can get something that is, you know, that is stacked in science and evidence and all that kind of thing, and then you can get people that resell that in you know, for want of a better word, that actually, you know, don't do a brilliant job of it. So I think that's a perfect example of, you know, what we've been talking about all along, about that watering down and then ending up with something that is not accurate. So we do have to be really careful. But the whole subject here that we're talking about is, you know, is the separate types of role, which comes down to our behaviour type in terms of where we're drawn. We have innovators. Innovation does not live in technical books. Innovation and creativity, people that are willing to carve a new path, and dare I quote Star Trek and say, to boldly go where no man has gone before. That doesn't come from people who are sitting there checking the research and the theory and the facts. They are two separate roles which are incredibly important, and they need to come together. I know where I am on that spectrum, and I know where other people are on the spectrum, and if we are one, then we need the other in order to complete us. I'm the innovator, the creator, the one that carves my own paths, creates my own analyses, and you know, and works on instinct to a certain extent. I prove it, I get the results, I get my friends who are doctors to, you know, to write in the evidence there, and we work together to create something that is, you know, that is what I would think is, you know, is as perfect as it can be. And I think that's the important thing. We need to understand what else we need to complete ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Michelle. And I think even Helenique, fantastic approach, and that's really going to help our listeners at least formulate or kind of course correct themselves in case in case their approach had a few loopholes in them. Well, with that said, I'm afraid we are almost out of time. So before we wrap up, let me ask my guests a question to end on a positive and hopeful note. So if there's one takeaway message that our audience should walk away with today, what would that message be? The one message they should walk away with.
Helenique, do you want to go first?
I want to fly in the face of a lot of what we've said with a little bit of a riddle. So I think for me, the big thing is check out what expertise really means for you, and check out what expertise really means when someone uses that word, what it means to them. And there's a really interesting little quote that I found which speaks and plays a little bit with everything we've said today, and it says, "She or he who has magic needs no tricks." That's my quote for today.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to play with everything we've spoken about.
Yeah,
Thank you for
lovely. That's really lovely. I think my takeaway from this whole thing would be to not get tied up in, you know, whether the theory and the science is absolutely 100%, because we know that it's evolving all the time. So I think my message is one of development, of evolution. In order to evolve, we have to be flexible. We have to bend like the reed in the wind. We have to have that flexibility. That is what is going to help us to evolve, and that flexibility is what is going to help us to be able to help others. So my final note is, in order to evolve, stay flexible, stay open-minded.
All right, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle and Hellenic. Fantastic thoughts. All right, with that said, I'm afraid we are out of time, and we come to a close of today's conversation on science and pseudoscience in corporate training. And we just separated fact from fiction. So big thank you to our guests, Hellenic and Michelle. Thank you so much for being with us here today. It's been a pleasure. Do stay back a few minutes after our live session has ended for a short debrief. And finally, to big thank you to all our Luminary team, to our audience who tuned in both today and for the last 9 weeks, and to our members of the audience who have been watching our webinars and episodes of This, That, and the Other on our YouTube page. Thank you so much for supporting us. So once again, for those who may not know, all our past episodes of This, That, and the Other and our other webinar series are available on Luminary Learning Solutions YouTube page. So do swing by our page, and don't forget to like our videos and hit that subscribe button. Well, with that said, that's a wrap for season 2 of This, That, and the Other. Stay tuned to our social media pages for updates on next season. Until then, I'm Varun Chandra Mohan. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us today. Stay safe and see you soon.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much, Varun. Thanks, Michelle. So lovely to be with you.
Yeah, thank you both. Take care.